I've had my bike for a few years now, and I bought it at a pretty mid-level spec, so I figured it was about time to upgrade the suspension. I feel like it's a fairly common experience to go to a bike shop knowing what you want to upgrade and then realizing you don't have all of the information that you need about your bike. So I wanted to talk with Jordi about what my options are for upgrades with the new product that Fox just released, as well as what's everything that you need to know about your bike to be able to correctly order your product. So I'm looking to upgrade on my bike, and it's 170 mil in the front and 160 mil in the rear.
Okay, and Meta 2.9 or Meta?
27.5.
Okay, cool. So that's a good thing to know. And almost every manufacturer posts shock sizes on websites.
Gotcha. So is that kind of step one then? Find your bike on your manufacturer's website?
Find your bike, yeah, for sure. I mean, hopefully you know anyway, but that's the first step.
Yeah.
Look at pictures. And then you kind of want to decide 38 or 36. 36, for most people, I would say would be 160 mil and below. Obviously, the difference is 2 mil. It's like 36 to 38. The 38's bigger, it's heavier, it's stiffer. Performance-wise, they're both great. Like, you're not going to suffer. 120 to 150 29ers are really popular, especially here. And the 36 is amazing. I'm running a 140 mil 36 on my tall boy, and it's unreal. So
nice.
For that kind of application, 36 all the way. The fork is relatively easy, right? You need to know wheel size and travel and offset. A lot of people like to put longer travel forks on the front. So if your bike's a 160, it's probably spec'd with a 170. Then a lot of people go, well, if it's 170, why don't I just do 180? Normally, I'd be pretty careful with that. You start getting into territory of making changes that aren't necessarily ideal. You'll raise the bottom bracket. You'll slacken the head tube angle. You shorten the reach, which is the distance between the bottom bracket and the handlebars. So a lot of those things aren't ideal, and unless you know that your bike will be fine that way, then maybe don't do it. Kind of stick to within 10 mil of the intended travel, I think is pretty safe. Offset's a little bit harder to explain how it affects handling. It's basically the millimeter in difference from center line to the axle. It used to be 29ers were almost all 51 mil offset. That came from nowhere. Nobody knows why. It just kind of ended up at 51, and little by little we've been examining it. Then everybody started moving back to around the 44 offset. What that's done is brings the wheel backwards a little bit. It slows your steering down because it increases trail. It makes the bike want to stay in whatever direction it's pointed. So it's a little bit harder to change direction, but it's a lot more stable once it's in that direction. So it either wants to go straight or it wants to be leaned over, but it doesn't necessarily want to go back and forth as much. And that's why in the beginning they ran 51 mil offset, because everybody thought 29ers didn't steer and they were hard to ride. So they made this longer offset that makes the bike steer quicker. But it doesn't necessarily make it a more fun bike to ride. So kind of pick what did your bike come with, what kind of riding you want to do again, and think about, do you want a quick steering, snappy 29er, or do you want a more descent-oriented short offset fork? So wheel size, fork travel, fork offset.
So obviously wheel size is what it is.
Is what it is.
Fork travel, for the most part, you should just keep it the same unless you have a good reason to change it.
Yeah.
And then offset is a personal preference thing?
I think offset's personal preference, and it's probably not. Most people haven't been able to ride back to back and then make make that decision for themselves yet.
Yeah.
That's pretty hard to do. But again, if you consider yourself slightly more gravity oriented, I would go with the shorter offset.
For my bike then, I was already at 170 mil, so I should go with the 38 in a 27.5 and the 37 mil offset.
Exactly. Super easy.
Sweet. That is easy.
Yeah, it's not that bad. There's not that many choices.
Nice. Cool. So then what about shocks?
The shocks are a little bit trickier. You have DPS, which is our inline shock, more towards the cross-country short travel side. You have the DPX2, which is it's a trail bike shock, piggyback reservoir, more oil flow, less adjustments than the higher end shock. If you're getting into the higher end stuff, that's the DHX2 and the Float X2, which are the fully four-way adjustable compression rebound. Basically the same as what the World Cup guys are riding and the EWS guys. Well, it is the same. Then what you get to pick is air or coil. And that gets hard unless you really know your bike. If your bike is compatible with a coil, and that means that it has a certain amount of rate change or progression built in, how do you pick between coil and air? Coils are incredibly supple. They have very low friction and generally have really good grip. They do tend to make a little bit of noise because dirt gets stuck between the spring or the spring collars. You get little grindings every once in a while, but they're much lower maintenance because they don't have this air sleeve on it that requires lubrication. So the performance of a coil is going to be far more consistent. But with that traction and that suppleness, you also get a bike that moves around a whole lot more. So if you don't do a ton of pedaling and you value efficiency, the coil might not be the most efficient. So for most people, an air shock is the easiest way to go. You don't have to worry about coils, picking out the right one. You don't have to worry about kinematics of the bike. You just set up an air shock, set your air pressure, then work on volume spacers, and good to go.
So for the guy that goes into the bike shop and wants to upgrade his shock, what are the metrics you need to know?
You need to know shock size, which is the eye-to-eye. Hold on, I'll grab one.
Okay.
You need eye-to-eye, which is center of this bolt to the center of this bolt.
Okay.
In most shocks now, it's metric. The other thing is you can just look up on your bike manufacturer and find shock size.
So it should be listed by it will be listed by your bike manufacturer, but worst case, you could measure eye to eye.
Yeah. The second measurement is stroke, which is how far the shock compresses. So that would be kind of this dimension here. And that'll also be listed on the website. Most of these are adjustable, so there'll be one eye to eye, and then there'll be multiple stroke options. It's all the same shock, they just add in a little travel reducer.
Gotcha. Just looked up my shock before this, and it says I've got metric standard 230 by 60.
There you go.
So 230 is the eye to eye and 60 is the stroke?
Yeah.
Cool.
So then the last thing you need to know is mounting hardware. And that's these little push-in pieces. It's becoming pretty standard that it's a 30 mil on the bottom, which is 30 mil width. It's not 100%, but lots and lots of bikes are now 30 mil on the bottom.
Gotcha.
The top is still all over the place. This is a normal mount shock. You also have trunnion shocks that have the mount kind of built in, and the pivot's actually on the frame.
Okay.
That just gets rid of one of these little bushings. It's a little bit lower friction, but it's more expensive to make. Normally, you can find, you don't need to know exact mounting hardware if you go into your shop to buy a shock, or if you order it online. You can look up bike sizes and it'll figure it out for you. But if you're going in blind, it's best to know, I need this size shock in this stroke. And if you're going from one Fox shock to another, you can just pop the hardware out and replace it. All of our shocks run the same hardware. So it's super easy.
So that means I could go to a bike shop and say that I want the Float X2 and I need a 230 by 60 and I'd be good to go.
Yep, that'd be a perfect choice.
Sweet. Well, thanks for helping me select everything, and I'm sure once I get everything ordered and in, you're gonna have to help me set it all up. So maybe we'll do that next time. But thanks for everything, man. I'll talk to you soon.
Cool, I'll talk to you soon.
All right, see you later.